Hey there, folks. Welcome to the second episode of our platform tutorial series, in which we managed to have a little background parallax layer, which is what it's called. We have a little enemy. We can die from an enemy. We have a game over screen, which we can restart, kill the enemy, and also die from falling into the abyss. Let's get to it. So let's start off making the enemy appear in the screen. So going back to a sprite, let's just draw something here. Feel free to draw any type of enemy you might see fit. And this is what I've come up with. I know it's pretty horrendous, but I've told you before I'm a terrible drawer. If you have something awesome, let me know in the comments or something. So going back to Godot, which is this one, I also included it in the sprites, exported from a sprite, put it into this folder, and just drag and drop my enemy over here. As you can see, my enemy is in the screen and it's small once again. But before we do anything, let's do the same thing that we did with the main character, which is right click and save branch as scene. So I just create a scene called enemy. I'll just open it and make sure that my enemy is in the 0, 0 position. I'll also scale over here, say 4, 4. I also am noticing that it's not properly imported. So let's also fix this. We go to enemy import. I'll make sure to set filter disabled. So once I come back here, my enemy will be around here. I'll just put him somewhere. And obviously now there's nothing going on with the enemy. He is just a sprite being drawn on the screen. So we'll need to do some similar logic that we did with the character so that he will have some kind of physics, basically meaning that he hits the ground, he doesn't actually go through, he has gravity. First things first, we'll add a physics body to it. So in Node2D, collision object physics, you can also type in here something. Our enemy doesn't have the complex jump system that we try to do with our character, right? It just will do something that we want it to do. And if, for example, in our case here, we just want the enemy to have the plain old physics system that, say, Godot has. So given that, I can just associate it with a rigid body. I'll just make sure this is the scene root and call this, oh sure, just leave it like this, and add a collision shape also. Collision shape 2D, same thing that we did before, so nothing different here. Make sure it's correctly hitting everything around the enemy. And with this, the enemy will be able to stand its ground and also not go into walls if it's walking about. So if we run this as it is right now, the enemy will be here and it's not falling, but it goes like, does this weird things. I have to say this is kind of funny and fun to do, but yeah, this is not exactly what we want. We want the enemy or the player or we want some kind of script to be able to check whether or when the player hits over the enemy, similar to old style platformer games. This is what we are going to do. And to do that, first, we need to check if the enemy is hit from above. So we can do a similar thing that we did before with this kind of collision box. Being more specific, our player is using an area 2D. And this area 2D handles the collision with the ground, right? So we can do something similar to the enemy and add an area 2D as a child of it, and also a collision shape. This collision shape will also be a rectangle, and this rectangle will handle if someone hits the enemy from above. So I can just say it's over here. So if someone comes and hits this area 2D, which will be in the other collision layer at the same time, the enemy should die. That's what I'm going to do. Even if I just do this, even if an enemy falls on top of another enemy, the enemy below it will die if that's what you want in your game. So feel free to use that as well. I'll also need to add a script in my rigid body. So just create an enemy script and make sure to connect the body entered, or in this case, it's not body entered, it's area entered, because our player has an area below it. So we are going to check area with area, which means area entered. And if another area entered, something happens over here, I'll just say print the area, just to see what's happening, and also queue free. Queue free is basically saying, oh, just free myself from memory and removing me from my scene. So I'm destroyed, basically. Notice that there's also free. Both do basically the same thing, but we'll eventually get to the differences between them. And coming back to the enemy, just fixing something, we actually need to use the second layer in second mask to match what the main character area 2D is actually checking. So the same layer and same mask. And now if you run the game, you'll see that the enemy just cease to exist, let's say, when the player goes on top of it. I also want to do something to our level, because this grayish background is not very good with the other color schemes that we are going on with our game. So let's go back to Sprite and make a background image for our game. And so what I have done is I went through some ideas in my head and I made 4 different sprites. One for, say, it's the grass, which is near my character. Some like a far away grass, and even far away mountain, and just the sky with some clouds. So I've just saved all of them as PNGs and imported back in my Godot, and this is what I basically built. Let me build it entirely with you once again. Just delete this, and here we are with what we had before. The many different back that I created from a sprite are over here in sprites. If I just drag them all here, I'll have all 4 of them to mess around with. I'll just change to this, and okay, there are these 4 different sprites. Also remember, once you import, make sure to select them, go to import, deselect filter, and re-import. Just make sure it's not blurred out. Something that I'll also do with this is in transform, I'll make sure everyone is in 0, 0, including you. You're not escaping me. And also all these 4 in transform, I'm going to scale them up by 10 by 10. So my sky is over here, my mountains are over here. They are not quite in the correct positions that I want. If I just move them up, say to here, now they are behind my character. But notice that something interesting happens. If I move everyone to their proper places and put them over each other, something like this. If I run, when I move, my entire sprites behind the character move with them, like with the level itself. It's not exactly what I want. I want to give that effect of 3D that you have in several platformer games you have around. To do that, we use a different node called Parallax. So first of all, you get this Parallax background, which is the first node that you want to create this parallax scrolling background, which is what we were trying to do. I'll just put it in the proper place. And inside it, we add parallax layer, 1 layer for each different 3D effect that we want. So I'll add 4, 1 for each. I'll just make them in the correct naming. I'll put 1 in each. And now if I run like this, it's already going to be the same. You actually need to change a few configurations. First, here in Parallax background, I'll make sure to enable follow the viewport, which basically means now my parallax will follow my camera. If I run this right now, you'll see that things are moving, but not exactly how I want it yet. Something else that I'll do is I'll go to this first parallax, which is my foreground layer. I'll make sure this is around here. I'll also notice that there's a little bit missing to the right, so I'll just duplicate it and fill the gap. I'll eventually do to the other ones too. And in the parallax layer, there's this motion thing in which I can scale how much motion do I want to apply when my character or my viewport moves. In my case, the foreground, I will want half over here and 0.2. So I just messed around with these values to find a nice balance. So if you focus now only in the foreground, you'll notice that it's kind of following the character fairly reasonably. I'll also move it a little bit up so that we can see it a little bit better, something like this. Now I'll do the same thing to the other. To this one, I'll move over here. I'll just show a little bit of it. I'll duplicate. I'll move the duplicated version to this side, same to the mountain like this, and same thing to the sky. Do something here. Oops, and the other sky. So now to the second layer, parallax, the naming are wrong, right? This should be parallax 2. And this one should be parallax 3, which I won't be able to do it because the names are duplicated. And now in the parallax 2 layer, which is the darker green, I'll have a motion 0.2, 0.1. This one is 0.5, 0.2. 0.2, 0.1. This one will be 0.10 because I don't actually want to see the mountain going up and down. And finally, the sky will just be 0 because I don't expect it to move at all. Now, if we run the game, you'll see this nice scrolling effect. And I guess I need to move everything a little bit to the left still, but it's looking pretty nice, right? I'll just select everything here, click on move, and I'll move a little bit to the left. Something like this. Okay, now it's much better. In a normal case, you'll just duplicate a bunch of images to the right, to the left, up, or just create a very much larger image in the first place to be able to play something bigger. There are other techniques that I'll get through, so scrolling or something, other things like that in the future, but for now, I think this is the good enough basics to go through. So now I can properly see the outline of my character. You can see that it's like kind of sliding above the grass, and I can kill the enemy. Let's also now handle if I fall here, I actually die. And something else that I want is when I fall, I don't want the camera to follow it anymore. So if I get here and start falling, I will stop the camera, make sure it's not following the character anymore, and kill the character once the character reaches some place over here. So let's handle the death mechanic first. Of course, I could simply create here a new child with area and follow everything that we did for these two areas. But now I'll start introducing to you a somewhat better organization style that Godot and also other engines and other programming practices recommends, which are encapsulating things in specific, say, modules or objects, or in our case, in specific scenes. This is what I'm going to do. I click here in the plus button. I'll create a new scene specifically for the death mechanic, let's say. So this is a death pit. If I write it correctly, will be good. Death pit. The death pit will have an area 2D. The area 2D will have the collision shape. Now the collision shape can be something else if you like, even a polygon or like something else. I'll just keep it simple with a fairly large, like this, collision shape. My death pit will also have a script in which when either a body or, oops, yeah, either a body or an area enters it. I'll just come here, and what I'll do with it is I will create a new signal, my own custom signal, that I'll send through this death pit. And back here in main, I'll make sure to connect my main character with my death pit. Or basically with all my death pits in the future, right? So at first, I will declare that I have a signal. This is how you do it. I have a signal, say, detected. And once I enter the body, what I can say is emit signal. I'll emit the detected signal. And I can also add some parameters. And I'll just say it's me. So I detected the signal, this death bit in specific, just in case I want to use this in the future. And the death signal is representative of this body, or same thing over here, of this area. So if I do this and save it as death bit, back here in the main, if I drag and drop my death bit over here, or click here and select death bit, I can add my death bit to the scene. I'll just move it over here and say something like this. And now if I click on my death bit here in node, there's inspector nodes where I can see the signals. There's my custom signal also here called detected. I will use this to be to make sure from my main script, if whatever fell in the death bit is my main character, I will actually make it die. So first of all, let's just say I'll received from and to. Notice that I didn't receive it by default, what I'm actually passing from my emit signal. If you want to do this, you can go back to my death bit signal declaration and say this. So basically I'm saying this signal has these parameters that I sent out. So coming here back to death bit on node, now you'll see here from and to. So this is just a way to define what are exactly the information coming from a signal in your custom script. So coming back here, if you disconnect here, I'll just delete everything that I just did and try to connect it again. The two variables will be included over here, which is much better than before. So for now, what we actually will do is the to will be the character, right? So I'll just say to.queueFree. Just saying I died. And let's also make a game over screen. Do you remember this screen we had over here? You win. I could also just duplicate this label and say this label is the game over label. This label is a you win label. And the game over will have game over. So both of them are active at the same time. So instead of doing this, I can now choose whether I want to show you win or game over through my script. Right here, I'm showing the container, right? So instead of showing the container, now I'll show the you win. And if I actually was detected to die, I will show game over. Another way to do this is instead of having two separate labels, you could also have one single label and change the text inside it, but we'll do this in the future. For now, if we now die, game over. And notice that like my character goes away, suddenly my camera also goes away, my camera instance, this one over here. I went back to my default viewport, which is the one that I would go to if I didn't have any camera. So now the next step will be to not allow the camera to follow the character anymore when the user falls here. So we're going to modify a little bit our depth bit and say there is actually two things to the depth bit. The place where the death occurs, and the other place where camera split occurs. And notice that if you copy paste or duplicate this node, inside the collision shape, the shape will be exactly the same, which means that if I change here the shape, I'm changing this variable over here. I'll actually change both of them because I'm changing the same variable. So what I can do is just click on the one that I want to be different. Click here and make sure this is unique. So now they are different. So now I can actually change them without without changing the other one. So if I do this, go back to my main scene. Now I can more or less see what I actually want. Maybe something like this. Looks good enough. So what I'll do is if my user passes this area, my camera, I won't actually follow the character anymore with my camera. How do I actually stop following? If you remember our previous tutorial, the way that I started following in the first place was putting the camera inside the character. So what I can do is just move it away. And if the user, I don't know, manages to pass over it, then I move it back. So just to make sure I can also handle this in the future, I'll do something like this. I need to send now a new signal, which is different from the detected. I'll say this detected now is death detected, and the other one will be fall detected. I don't know. R to D, okay. So in this one, let's fix the signals. I'll double click here, make sure to connect over there, double click here, connect over there, same thing over here because the name changed. Back here, body. Okay, so what I want now is on my area to D death, I want to send this death detected. And on my camera split, I will emit the fall detected. These two go away. Save. And I need to fix this body and area. Okay. Now everything looks fine. Back here, I need to reattach these two to my main script. So attach first one, attach the second one. And what I'll do now is I'll make sure I have a reference to my camera always. This can be done through several ways. I'll just do the way that we have been doing for a while now. So just use this, go to the character, main character, camera 2D. This way I can store the reference to my camera 2D over here. And this always has to be done on ready. So this little thing that I put before my camera is because I can't actually check where my camera is before I run this ready function. So one thing that I could do is just copy paste this over here and not define it here. So these two would be equivalent. But if you just put here over here, it's a little bit more easy to see all the on ready variables you may want in your script at once. So yeah, now we have the reference to the camera. If my fall is detected, I want to deattach my camera from my character. And if my death bit is detected, I want actually to do this. So now how do you actually do the camera processing and make sure that the camera goes away? Every node has a parent, and you can get the parent like this. And you can change the parent by several ways. But to me, the easiest way is just to, if I get the parent from a camera and I also store whatever myself is and the character, so I'll just say my character is this main character over here. Just to make things easier for me, I can say my camera now, instead of being where it is, it needs to be under the main scene, which is myself. So I'll get the character, remove child, and I'll remove the camera as a child, and I'll add a child over myself. Something like this. And what I can also do in the future, if I detect that the death didn't actually happen and I was able to get out of the pit that I fell into, is the reverse. Just make sure that I remove the child from myself and I add child to the character back. And of course, something that I forgot is if I leave these two areas colliding like this, they actually will collide between themselves and trigger the area collision. So I'll just make sure that they are not colliding with each other. There are other ways. You could also use the masks over here. Where is it? Here you can also try to use the masks, and actually I need to change the masks them to the second layer, right? Because I'm checking with the, although I could also check with the first layer and make sure I collide with the body, but feel free to choose whichever design pattern you prefer. So now if I fall over here, my camera just goes away. Notice that I went back to my original position. This is also not what exactly I want. So I'll also make sure that my camera position is at my current character position at that time. So going back to my script in my main, once I do this, I want my camera position to be the same as my character position. So now my camera will stop exactly where my character fell. Maybe I want it more upwards, or maybe you can do different kinds of styles over here. But now I have a game over screen. I can't actually move anymore. My game is frozen. Maybe now I want a button to restart. So let's do that now. Once my game over is enabled, what I'll actually have is not just this label, but many things. So instead of having just this label, let's add more things over here. We can have something called a VBox container, which will contain several things on top of each other. I'll call this game over, and this one will be back to label. And I can also have a button. So the button will handle similar to what you expect from a button. You use this node signal to be able to detect if the button was pressed or not, and when it was pressed. I'll just call it restart. If I click the button, then I will call something in my main. I'll call this method restart pressed, and what I'll do this here eventually is just restart my entire scene. For now, I'll just print something to show how it works. So yeah, of course I need to actually make this disabled for now. I need to die, and once I die I can click restart, and the restart is printed out over here. So how do I actually make the scene back to what it was before? The way you do that is using this change scene from the tree. Whenever you call this get tree from any kind of script, you're getting this tree over here. If you actually run the code as it is now, just to pass here, just show you guys, you'll notice that there's this remote and local. Local is whatever I'm editing, my project, and remote is what I'm running on the fly over here. If I change something here, I'll change my running game. And this is my tree, this scene tree. So if I do this get tree, I'll get the tree that I'm running over here, and I'll run some kind of script over here. Change scene is one of the methods that allows us to change what is the TSCN, or what is the scene that I'm actually running by default over here. So what I'll do is just drag and drop this, save, run, and now when I die, I can restart and my scene is restarted. So nice, this is how we restart the scene. Let's do the same thing if we actually hit the enemy on its side, because we actually need to die or to receive damage, right? If we do that. For now, let's die. To do that, we'll do something a little bit more simple than using separate collision shapes. The rigid body 2D itself also has the body entered and not area entered. Notice this is different, but it also has body entered. And if this body that enters the enemy is a character, then we should actually kill it. So this is how we're going to do. If the enemy has a body entered, I'll just call this rigid body 2D body entered in my own enemy. What I'll do is I will call in my body some method. However, I don't know if this body is actually a player, right? Because it's any kind of body. And my player over here, which is a body, is a kinematic body. We can't actually check right now if that body is a specific body that I know about. So the way to make this work properly is you can give your any class, any GD script, a class name. So now you're basically saying, okay, I extend my kinematic body and I should be called, say, main character. So with this internally, I'll know that this specific type of kinematic body is a main character kinematic body. So back to my enemy, I can check if body is main character. I can call something in my main character. Maybe receive damage. And maybe I'm an enemy, I have attack damage, which is by default 1. Export, because I want to see it outside. And maybe create different types of enemies with different amounts of attack. And I'll say receive damage of this amount of attack. Back in my main character, I can create this function called receive damage. I'll know what type of damage I have. I can have some kind of life, how many lives I have, how many hit points, how many armor, I don't know, depending on the game. We'll definitely implement this in the future, but for now, let's just kill the main character. So to do that, you all already know, Q3. And something else that I'll do is I'll also send a signal to my level called death, so that my level can know when I died or not. So I'll just emit signal here, death. I'll say I died. Back in my main scene, I can now detect when my main character dies by double clicking here, going to main. And if this happens, I'll do the same thing as over here when I died. I don't need actually to Q3 anymore, but I'll show the game over screen. And finally, back in our enemy, by default, notice that the rigid body 2D does not actually handles the contacts, just to avoid too many messages going and throwing around. So we'll actually enable it to the enemy. Just set this to 1 and enable this. You can see a little bit more of the information within it. If you save and run it again, I run to the side, I'm game over. Can restart it. And also I want the camera to stay where it was. So let's do this little change once again. The position needs to stay where it was. Here we go. Let's also check if we killing the enemy still works, and it still works. Now your imagination is a limit. Next video we'll talk about giving lives and also scores depending on times, depending on how long I take to reach the flag and how many enemies. I'll track the score and create a little local leaderboard, let's say, for future players. Maybe a main menu too. So see you next time.